So in this video, we're going to go over creating ROAs, or Route Origination Authorizations, and see what effect it has on the routing system. We'll also go over how to create a Ghostbuster or contact record as well. First off, let's check the state of the existing routing tables. So we'll log into the R4 router. Remember, the password is FNORD, F-N-O-R-D. And from there, we're going to show the BGP tables for show IP BGP. If we scroll down to the 192.168.8.0 block, we'll see that there are two routes for it, both of which are marked with an N, meaning that there is no validation found for either of the two routes. And they're being advertised by the 65533 and 65534 ASs. Remember that in our architecture, the B0 and B1 routers in our design are doing all of the advertising for the lab users' address spaces. They are each acting as an upstream ISP that is announcing your address space. So let's take this back to the user interface. And here, as I mentioned in the previous video, we actually have two different places that we can create ROAs. We can create a ROA from here, and we can create a ROA from this plus ROA button next to the unallocated resources. And I'll show you now what those do and how they're different. If I click the Create ROA button under the ROA section, it comes up with a blank ROA space. There is no prefix yet assigned, there is no max length, and there is no ASN number. If I go over to the plus ROA button over here under the unallocated resources, it's a little bit more convenient because it automatically populates the unallocated address space for which we wanted to create a ROA. So we'll leave it like that, and then we're going to put in a max length. You have to put in something. This restricts the routers that are advertising your space to advertise the maximum block length that you want them to release. So for example, if I put in a maximum block length of 24, it means that the upstream router will not be able to advertise anything smaller than a /24. A /28 would appear as invalid. I'm going to put in the upstream router's ASN number, 65533, and then I'm going to click Preview. Clicking Preview will take you to a confirmation screen saying, do you really want to create this ROA? Which I really do. And afterwards we'll be taken back to the home screen, where now you can see that our unallocated resources are blank because we've now allocated everything. We've said that the 65533 AS is allowed to advertise our block. And let's now check and see what effect this has had on the Let's check and see what effect this has had on the Quagga router for B4. So back here where we left off, I'm going to quit that and then do show IP BGP again. And if I scroll down to 8, it still shows as not found. And the reason for this is that it does take about a minute for the information to propagate. In the real world, the information can take a lot longer because router validation caches don't synchronize extremely fast. It can take a day sometimes for the caches around the world to synchronize. So make sure you create your ROAs a little bit in advance of your plans to allow a new AS to publish your routes. It's probably been long enough now that I can go back and run show IP BGP. And as we page down to number 8, now we see some validation changes. So here's the two entries, and as you notice, 65533 now has a V for validated next to it. This is different than the 65534 AS, which now has an I for invalid. The instant you publish one ROA, validators know that ROAs should exist for that address block, and therefore, the instant it finds one validated route, all the rest of the routes that don't have ROAs associated with them become invalid. In order to fix this, we need to go back and add a ROA to allow the 65534 AS's router to publish our address block. So going back to the interface, remember that there's no plus ROA button over here anymore, so I would either have to do the create button and then paste this in, or this magic little loop symbol is the equivalent of what the plus ROA button used to do up here. It's the most convenient to use. It's basically saying we want to add another ROA for the same address block. So if we click on that, it'll fill it in properly with the address block. I'm going to put in a max length of 24, and this time I'm going to do 65534, which is the other router that we want to authorize, and click Preview. It looks correct, so we'll click Create. And while we're waiting for the router cache to flush, let's go ahead and create a Ghostbuster record too. Remember too that this is a contact record. So as we go in here, we'll find that we have a contact record kind of looking form to fill out. We can specify who our parent is. We can specify who our name is. We can specify our email address and other contact information. Etc. I won't fill in the rest, but you understand the idea. If we click Save, it'll take us back to the main interface where you can now see that we have a Ghostbuster contact record published, so that when people have issues reaching our address space or some other reason, they can contact us appropriately. Let's go back to R4's router now and take a look and see what effect it's had on the system. So if we do show IP BGP and we go down to number 8, we'll find that they are both valid. This is what we expected. We've now published ROAs for each of the 2 upstream ASs that are publishing our routes for us. If we want to remove authorization, we can go back to hit the delete button. And if we delete it, it'll give us a confirmation screen again. We hit delete, and it will disappear from our ROA list. And after a short pause, so let's take a look and see what effect we've had on the system. If we page down to the .8 address block, we can now see that the 65534 router has indeed become invalid again after we've removed the ROA. So I do encourage you to download the image if you haven't done so, and go through the setup video and set it up for yourself and go play. In the next video, we'll walk through allocating resources from the parent to the child as well, and what it looks like to start functionally from scratch.